So I have two. There we go. Okay. Got the recording Zoom. All right. So believe it or not, you are in week 4. So you are right about a third of the way through this 14-week course. So good job thus far.
Get you a new message.
Huh?
Would you like to reply?
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. So week 4. And I want to make sure, can everybody see my screen? It should say week 4.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, outstanding. All right, so we'll start with what's due this Sunday night. Again, APSL Task 2 revisions due to me. Do not submit them to the Dropbox yet. I will let you know when to do that. Somebody asked about that earlier. What we want to do is make sure that both Task 1 and Task 2 are ready to go. So just submit your revisions as you normally have been, and I will get to those and then let you know when you go ahead and submit them to the Dropbox. The other thing that okay, I need to mute. Somebody is got some stuff in the background. Okay. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention to you is with the peer review Dropboxes. Most of you did a good job submitting them in the right place. Go ahead and put your peer reviews where it says the peer review Dropbox, and that just makes sure, and you can still create the running thread, but when you put it in the Dropbox, it just shows up in a separate place for me to grade. I can go ahead and get those graded and make sure you get your points for those as you complete them. I know we still have just a couple of people playing catch up from the hurricane, but I think most of those folks are going to be in good shape in the next couple of weeks. And you should be more than ready to go ahead and get prepared for your first Zoom team presentation, which will be coming up here in the next couple of weeks. Anybody had any questions? I mean, I looked at the peer reviews as they were submitted. They were, they were pretty good. They were pretty comprehensive. I just want to caution everybody to make sure you're giving some type of task-specific feedback, or even if it was, nearly perfectly done, make sure you tell them, what about it was really good, whether the paper was well organized, whether the citations were on point. You just want to get really good at giving that type of feedback. And one of the things you'll hear Dr. Lamb and Dr. Stedman tell you all the time is one of the biggest transitions that you will have to make in this program is making that switch from yourself and looking at yourself as a teacher versus looking at yourself as a teacher leader. I'm going to show you a couple of things that'll help you make that transition. So any questions on the peer reviews or the APSL Task 2 revisions? I think I got everybody's graded that submitted it, and if you came in, if you submitted it after Sunday, I'll make sure I get those graded tonight. so you can have what you need and you can keep it going. Anybody have any questions about the either the peer review or the APSL task 2? Okay, absolutely outstanding. All right, what I wanted to, and I have completely lost my little thing, but you know what? It's going to be okay. I hear a chat. All right. Amy asks, when we do the revisions, we just upload the Dropbox again, discussion board. Yes, Amy, that's correct. Just upload it to the discussion board. And once everything is ready to go, then when I respond back to you in the discussion board, I'll let you know to go ahead and drop it in the Dropbox. All right. All right. So this week, the topic was about the academic needs assessment process, gap analysis, EVOS, which we spent a good chunk of time last week talking about. I can go over that again if anybody has any questions. But I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking to you about the academic needs assessment. So if you could, let me know who has actually seen what IndaStar, which is where school improvement plans are housed. Has anybody actually seen that?
I have, Dr. Crawford.
Okay, that's one. Anybody else?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Question is, have you actually, okay, Amy is the SIP chair, so she has. Has anybody actually ever, have you actually seen the IndaStar document? One of the big topics today is the academic needs assessment, and I was actually able to find a generic copy of IndaStar, and we'll take a look at that in a second. So I was just curious who has actually seen the document, who hasn't. So Amy is the SIP chair, so obviously she has. Brenda says she just pulled it over the weekend. Okay. Okay.
I've seen it as a perspective and from SIT.
Okay, good. And I don't think there's anybody here from South Carolina, correct? All right, good. Everybody's from the old North State. All right, so North Carolina has adopted IndaStar a couple of years ago, and that's where all school improvement plans are held. And I'm going to pull up this needs assessment survey that I actually found. Make sure I can share. And I think that's it, yeah. All right, does everybody see that? Okay, I'm going to assume that you can. All right, so one of the things that you do when you start taking on the role, when you make that transition from teacher or teacher leader to assistant principal, is you will live with trying to figure out what the needs of your school are. IndaStar takes this, I know it says 16 pages, but it's actually broken down into the different dimensions of IndaStar, into the various areas that you're going to look at. And so you see it gives you the collection analysis. DPI gives you a rubric, and we'll take a look at that in a second. And then it breaks them down into its component parts. You've got instructional excellence and alignment, leadership capacity, professional capacity, planning and operational effectiveness, and then families and communities on the last two. And so as you go through this, the days of principals sitting in their office and coming up with answers to these things on their own is over. While you could do this, it's not recommended that you do it by yourself, and so that's why you have to make sure that your leadership team is actually in a position to help you pull this off, because you'd go stark raving mad if you were trying to figure this out on your own. And so here on page 1 of the school needs assessment, it asks for a very simple thing. They want to look at school achievement and growth data. So right now you could you would be in a position, since all the state data was released just last week, to be able to put in your pertinent data. So this obviously is an example of a high school, and the big three, which used to be 10, by the way. When I was a teacher, high schools were rated on 10 standards. I know that because I taught 2 of them, but they're down to 3. So here they have English 2, Math 1, and biology. It asks you about increases or decreases. It also talks about gaps, and we're going to talk about gaps here in just a second. Remember, and I think I may have mentioned this last week when we looked at EVOS, to have a recognizable subgroup, the magic number is 30, and that actually has come down. It used to be 40, but now it's to 30. So you need 30 students in a subgroup to create a group to assess. How many teachers met growth last year? How many exceeded growth? Any strengths, weaknesses? And so that's what we were talking about last week. The individual teacher growth data won't be in until October, November. But again, you'll be able to sit down. You'll look at that data. You'll look at your teachers that met, exceeded. Hopefully you won't have anybody not exceeded, and then you start breaking down that data into subgroup, where your strengths, which teachers did well with African American males, which teachers did well with students with disabilities, which teachers did well with Hispanic students, whatever have you, or any of those areas where you're struggling. It talks about student attendance. So your team will sit with you, and even just putting this together, you may have to pull in your school's data manager or your financial secretary. We can look at absences, months with the highest absences. And that's actually accurate. If you all didn't know, the 2 months with the highest absences, or where teachers are more likely to quit, especially new teachers, are actually October and February, if you didn't know that. It asks you to talk about your TWC data, and all of you should know that this is a TWC year. So that's going out. Where's your biggest area of disagree? Where's your biggest area of degree? So it's actually your needs assessment. InduStar walks you through exactly what type of data that they're looking for. So again, I've posted this under week 4, right under the template, and you can pull it up and play with it at your leisure if you've never seen it before. Again, here on page 2, it gives you, and I may have to share this again, so just make sure you can see it. All right. So again, it gives you the ratings as you're looking at all of these standards. Again, lacking, emerging, embedded, and leading. My suggestion to all of you would be to, especially if it's the first time you've done this, or if you're doing this after a couple of years where you're having to reset, I think you're much better off being honest about where your school is or is not, than just marking everything as leading and then not have the data to back it up. After that, you simply get into share. So then you just go through these data questions under each of the standards. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but here is instructional excellence. And then it asks you, have you developed and implemented, plan that communicates clear goals and instructional strategies aligned to the NC course study? Are you leading? Are you embedded there? Are you emerging? And are you're lacking? So let's kind of put this up right here. So then what happens is you give yourself a rubric score, and then the scores that you do across the domain, again, here is 16 pages long, so we're not going to go through all of them, But then that score will give you an idea of where your initial focus need to be. Okay. Any questions there on how to use the needs assessment? Again, this is the one actually pulled from IndyStar. So this is the one that my leadership team and I did last year. So we're in year 2 of this for our school. We're looking at last year's data now. We're tweaking, some things. And then, that's going to be our plan going into 2019, 2020. Anybody know how long you create these plans for?
Is it 3 years?
Yeah, 3 years, and then you want to go back and look, reassess, unless you had a really, really good year, or you had a really, really bad year, and we'll get to what that looks like here in just a second. So again, those of you that have never seen IndyStar, who have never had a chance to play with it, I found you a blank needs assessment or a sample needs assessment, and so I would urge you to go in and look at it, and it would actually also give you a great point of conversation with your principal as you're asking him or her why certain directions or decisions have been made about what is or what isn't happening in school. Any questions here on the needs assessment? Okay, could not have explained that perfectly, but again, obviously, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll definitely get back with you. All right, so the IndyStar document gives you your big picture view of the school, and so once you have that, and once you have an idea of once you have that, and once you have an idea of where your school is, then you're going to have to take this down to, all right, so how do we address what's happening from class to class to class? And I found you a couple of things that I thought you could do well to look at as well. Another document that I posted for you under standard, under this one, is not anything you necessarily have to do with, but there's some information on here that you could use. How many of you, if you walked into a classroom and you wanted to check immediately what the standard being taught was, how many of you would know where to look at what the standard is?
Do you mean as far as look in the classroom, or?
Yeah, if you walk into a classroom and you see a teacher teaching X, how would you know what standard that teacher was teaching?
Well, I know they were at my school, they would have it, the objective and standard posted on the board. To verify that that's what they should be teaching, you will go to North Carolina DPI and find a standard course of study and make sure that's a legitimate objective for them and standard for them.
Okay.
I
And
also have available to me our unit pacing guides, so I can always see about where they should be and what standards being covered at that time.
okay. Well, both of you are correct. I would like to give you another resource, and that resource is, well, first of all, there's an app for that. If you go on, hang on one second. If you go to whatever your platform is, whether it's Apple or what have you, there is an app called North Carolina Standards. You'll know you've found the right one when you find this cute little, oh, let me get it over here. Oh, you can't see it. Anyway, it'll be a gold background with the shape of North Carolina on it. And if you download that app, then you are walking around with the standard course of study in your phone. And so whenever I walk into classrooms, I can go in, I can choose standards, I can choose math, traditional, math integrated, language arts, history, social studies, and science. And then I can choose grade level. It goes from kinder all the way up to, we got Algebra 2, fourth courses, and mathematical practices on this app, and I can go right in. So you don't have to run back to your office to look at a notebook or carry around a 10-pound notebook with all the standards that you're addressing in your building. So if you do not have that app, I would strongly recommend it. And you'll know you found the right one when you've got a gold background with a black shape of North Carolina on it. It's called North Carolina Standards. And it basically gives you all the standards at your fingertips. The document that I wanted to show you is not being nice at the moment. Let me see if I can find it one more time. Oh, here we go. Okay. So, okay, let me get in here and share this again. Stop it. Where's it share? Here we go. Let me share. Oh, I had it. Here it is. All right, anybody see that? It says standards and practice. All right, once you complete the school's needs assessment, that gives you kind of your big picture, 20,000 foot view of what's happening in your school. At some point, you're going to have to take that down and get into the weeds of what's happening in classrooms, whether by department or from classroom to classroom. There are several pieces of information in this particular document that I wanted to share with you, particularly as it relates to when they're talking about the instructional gap analysis. How many of you know that it is more common than not that you will walk into a classroom and what the teacher is teaching is actually not on grade level? Has anybody experienced that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what you get is the difference between teachers that assign this as an essay. I'll give you a second to read that. Again, 7th grade writing assignment. Would you rather have either your child or students in your school get this assignment or this one? And yet both those assignments were given.
Can you share your screen at the second one?
Okay, wait a minute. Everybody see that one? A big me on the left? So the first one is a, very solid assignment and frank, lots of different choices in the assignment, lots of rigor, versus who's my best friend, what chore do I hate, a car that I want, and who's my heartthrob. And yet both these assignments were found in 7th grade classrooms in some district in California. I don't know that it's much different right now. So these are the type of things you're going to have to look at after you've done your needs assessment for your school, and then you're going to have to start getting into gap analysis and instruction in your building. What I wanted to show you, the other thing I wanted to show you here was this. Here we go. Can anybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Um, folks, this is the thing that you're going to have to begin guarding against. If you can't tell, as early as the middle part or end part of second grade is where there begins to be a disconnect between the grade level of the assignment and what's the actual standard of what students are given. And if you see right by the end of 8th grade, it is not uncommon for that gap to be almost a year and a half difference. So you walk into, what this is saying is you walk into an 8th grade classroom and you're likely to see assignments that are 6th grade in nature. Now, I want you to think about that and what implications that has, especially as whether it's this 5th grader who spent the year doing 4th grade work, who then goes to middle school over here in 6th grade, who spent the year getting 5th grade work, and 7th getting barely 6th, and 8th getting not much more than that. Now, look at what happens when you get to high school. Can anybody see that?
Yep.
You're averaging a full year. And then if you look at 12th grade, you're running, just shy of, 2.5 years behind. And these are students that are supposed to be able to go out into the world.
Dr. Crawford.
Function. Yes, ma'am.
Can I share something? It's amazing that you just had that assignment up there showing the difference. I attended a conference regarding my daughter in 11th grade last year. I promise you that me assignment, the second one, was an assignment given to her in American History 2 honors course. And it was strange because they said she didn't give much effort in the assignment, and she said the assignment was boring. She didn't see the student, my daughter, did not see the connection into the assignment with the content and why it was even necessary. They called a parent conference about her not being engaged. They told me when she comes in this class, she takes a personal trip mentally to Hawaii, they say, and just gaze out the window. So I had to change her class.
Wow. Well, the sad thing is,
it was set up just like the me assignment. Fill in the rest of the sentence. Who are you and where are you? It was strange to me to see for 11th grade honors class.
Wow. Well, yeah. And you're going to find wherever you wind up in your first assignment, whether it's an elementary school, whether it's a middle school, or whether it's a high school, that this is a lot more common than you would think. And so part of what you're going to have to do is really work with teachers to really address what is a standard. And you will find, folks, that it is also not uncommon for teachers not to understand the standards. And that goes back to having PLCs and why having effective PLCs are so critical. At Northridge Middle School, my last 3 years, we were able to make high growth my last 3 years there. But one of the first things I noticed was that math planning my first year, they would just break out the textbook and go by the chapter. And no one wanted to address the standard. And the argument was initially, well, the textbook is aligned to the standards. And I'm going to tell you right now, folks, no, it's not. You will never, ever find a textbook that is fully aligned to the standard. Even the vocabulary is different. If you look at the vocabulary that is called for in the standard as it is written versus the vocabulary in a textbook, you're going to find that textbooks dummy down instruction. And so if that's where your teachers are beginning to lay their lesson plan, then they're already starting from a deficit. And part of what you're going to have to do is to be able to have those difficult conversations in PLCs and how to, properly address instruction plan. And then, when they come up with whatever activities they're going to come up with for, that lesson or that set of lessons, does it match the standard? Because you'll often find that that's also a disconnect between what students are doing and what the standard is. And I'll show you something else in a second. Guilford County right now is working with new leaders, and they've actually pointed me out to a couple of things that I now go into a classroom and look at things a lot differently, because we learn to take what's called low inference notes. And with low inference notes, once you walk into a classroom, you don't presume intention. And so, I could be in a situation where I'm walking into Edie Murray's classroom and, he may be asking questions, and I might presume, oh yeah, those are really, really, great questions. And, 2 or 3 students answered and they answered correctly, versus, just saying, what, the teacher asked 2 or 3 questions or 2 questions, here's what the questions were, and that's it. We'll get into that later on. It's just a really different way of looking at what's happening in a classroom. The other thing I wanted to show you out of here was this screen, because just as Brenda pointed out, share, here we go. What happens is, and she was talking about assignments, as the grade level increases, so from kinder to 8th grade and from 8th grade to high school, look at this downward trend between where they are on the grade level and then the number of aligned assignments to the standards. So by 8th grade, they are just over half. Folks, right there is the beginnings of your academic gap. You want to know why you walk into an algebra classroom and you see 2x plus 12 equals 36 on the board, and you look at students and they're trying to count on their fingers? Here you go. And actually, that particular problem is actually back here in kindergarten and 1st grade, but that's another discussion. But look at this. As the older they get, the fewer assignments they get that are actually on grade level. So for you high school folks, if you wonder why they come in the 9th grade unprepared, well, here you go. They've only done maybe a half a year's worth of work on grade level.
Dr. Crawford, do you
Yes.
find, because you've been in the field long, and that this is, and I'm not being ugly against any one group, that when you get a middle school teacher go up to the high school, do you find that more prevalent? That they kind of bring their middle school type of teaching or planning up to the high school?
Actually, not, because if they did, we would have far fewer high schools with some of the issues that we have if that were the case. What you will find is more middle schools need to look like effective elementary schools, and high schools need to look a lot more like effective middle schools. The biggest thing, one of the biggest issues in high schools, and I can say this because I was one of you as a high school teacher. There are far too many high school teachers that are convinced that they teach content, not kids, and that's a difficult. I mean, you're looking at these grown men that are 6'5", 6'6", Division I prospects, and you see him as a man, versus just a very large kid that could still have some instructional deficits that you have to meet. But if it were the case that more middle school teachers were to bring that kind of mentality to the high school, I think high schools would actually be better off, not worse off.
Dr. Crawford,
Yes, sir.
quick question.
Yeah.
And I just want to get your opinion on this. As I was digging into the data and talking with my PLC members, we noticed that our school really is missing an opportunity when it comes to our students with disabilities. In our EC department, and our EC department right now is actually struggling because a person, they left right before the school year started, so we haven't filled that position yet. So they really, they're really having a hard time trying to juggle everything that's going on, and trying to service all the kids and be in the inclusion classes and all of that stuff. And we're heading into, we're getting close to October, and we're still some people short. But within the inclusion class, one of the things I guess I've had an issue with is that I don't think that, and I just want your opinion on it, about the level of rigor that you're giving the inclusion kids. I think that in our school, we could do a better job of pushing them towards grade level learning and whatnot. And sometimes I just hear some of my colleagues just say, well, these kids can't do this and they can't do that. And I think that, personally, if we push them more, we will probably get better results, at least when it comes from, some of the testing and whatnot. So I just want to get your opinion on that, because I think it really falls into line with not getting grade level assignments, in the 8th grade. We're still treating them like 5th or 6th grade.
So when you look at John Hattie's research on those things that are most effective for student achievement, number one is teacher efficacy. So speaking to what you just asked me, if teachers don't believe that students can do, then students won't. That's issue number one. Second, the other issue is I don't know that many places do inclusion well. Inclusion can be very effective and be a very, very powerful tool to provide not only assistance to your students with disabilities, but for also many students that are unidentified in a class can get that assistance as well. For those of you that don't know, especially in the middle school and high school, when you're creating the master schedule, you actually create your master schedule around your inclusion classes, and then you fill in every place else. If you don't do it that way, then the schedule never works out right. Then you've got to make sure that you've got a great PD and chemistry between the core instructional teacher and the EC teacher. What you find in far too many cases is the core teacher wants to treat the EC teacher like an assistant. Do me a favor, go run these copies for me, or go do a small group with your kids or whatever have you. When inclusion is done right, then what you have is a situation where you've got 18, 19, or 20 kids that just simply know they have two teachers, and it runs very, very fluidly. So you are correct in that level of efficacy is critical to make sure that teachers know that, because kids, especially kids from kids in poverty, whatever other deficits they have, their BS meter is amongst the best you will ever come up with. Kids know authentic, they know inauthentic. Edie, in your case where they're getting ready to move, Waddell, I know that South Tryon corridor beyond well, and those are the type of kids that will very quickly pick up if you're trying to BS them or trying to hustle them. So that teacher efficacy is absolutely critical to make sure that they know that it can be done. Another piece here I wanted to show you. Let me see. Speaking of students in high poverty schools and the rigor of instruction, and this also gets into, can anybody see that? I hope so. It also gets into grading, and is an A in one school an A at another? So again, just because I know the area, Edie, ask yourself, is a student that gets an A at Audrey Kell, is that the same as an A at Garinger? And if you look here, they match, a student that gets an A in a disadvantaged school probably would maybe get a C in compared to affluent students, or if they were in an affluent school, because we tend to dummy down instruction for kids that coming to us with some disadvantages. This one talks about 7th grade. Again, so here it has low poverty school and high poverty school. And if you look at the A here, equals about a C in a low poverty school. And that's a significant disconnect with our kids. And folks, this is what you're going to have to contend with. Wherever you land in your first assignment, these are the types of, and it'll also come out it'll also show up on your EVOS data. Especially when you start looking at the individual teacher data and their effectiveness with certain types of students, whether economically disadvantaged, students of color, males, females, Hispanics. This is where you really get into the EVOS data to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are with your staff. Okay. So I've got that posted for you as well. You can look at it at your own leisure. Now, mind you, and this is the scary thing, this was from a presentation that was given in 2009. So that's 10 years ago. And the sad thing is, even in the decade where this was first presented, I don't know that the data has changed all that much. So again, just ask yourself, what does that tell you? And then the last thing I wanted to share with you, I mentioned that Guilford County is looking at, is partnered with new leaders for principal professional development. And okay, I got some screens open. Let me get this. Here we go. When you're working with just individual teachers on what instruction should look like. Open. Here we go. Share. So this has been our focus, and this right now is what I am working with. Never. Okay, I screwed something up. Wait a minute. Share. And here it is. All right, can everybody see that? The 7 principles of the instructional core. This is what I'm working with. Gets into the heart of where you can live day to day to day as you're looking to manage and change instructional practices in your building. So there are 7. You may not necessarily have to focus on all 7. So for instance, my focus this year in my own building is 3 and 4. If you can't see it in the core, it's not there. Also, and Brenda, this speaks to what you spoke about earlier, task predicts performance. So you walk into a classroom, what you see students doing is a predictor of exactly how they're going to do on that task. So you giving a student in an honors class a all about me assignment, you know, there's no wonder the kid checks out. Why am I wasting all my time and all this, you know, extra credit and work you're gonna give me when this is what you give me? So right now, this is where I am living with regard to addressing instruction in my building. You know, so our focus for the year is, you know, getting back into tier 1 core instruction, what's happening day to day, lesson to lesson, unit to unit. And then, you know, as we're planning and we're, you know, coming up with all these activities, okay, does the activity actually match the whatever the standard is for, is it going to advance the student toward mastery of that standard? And then, of course, actually 5 fits in that as well. The real accountability system is in the task that students are asked to do. If you match this back to what we just saw about that disconnect between, you know, the grade level assignment beginning after 3rd grade, you'll see all this aligns, and you'll get to see what a big chunk of that looks like after you do your needs assessment in IndyStar. So under week 4, you've got a couple documents there I think that you can find very, very useful. You can take a look at what an IndyStar needs assessment looks like, what the leadership team should be doing to address the needs of the school. The PowerPoint or slides are just kind of a way to look at the data. The data has not changed much since that was first presented 10 years ago. And then this last one, talking about those those principles of this core instruction. And so you can look at it from the bottom up or the top down. And I think this would be a really good set of documents for you to look at to, if nothing else, help you start framing your thinking as you start making this transition from the classroom into administration. All right, so that is a whole bunch. Anybody have any questions or anything I can clarify for you? Okay, well, I don't know that I've done that good a job of figuring it out, but all right, so remember, again, we're in week 4. Fall break coming up here in a couple of weeks. All right, so again, due Sunday. Let me share this again. Close. Tired of you. Thank you. Share. There we go. All right, so again, due this Sunday, your task 2 revisions. I was up Sunday and got what was graded. I'll anybody that submitted anything after Sunday, I'll get those turned around for you tonight, so you can have those. Your revisions are due. Do not submit them to the Dropbox just yet. Once I take a look at your revisions, I will go ahead and tell you to resubmit that document into the Dropbox. And then your task 3 due.
Excuse me. Where do you want us to submit the revisions? To the discussion board?
Yes, the discussion board, and then I'll take a look at it. If it's good to go, then I'll respond on the discussion board. Go ahead and submit to Dropbox.
Post it general or reply straight back to you?
General.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then your task 3 is due, so make sure you take a look at that. If you got any questions, obviously shoot me an email or send me a text. And then don't forget your peer reviews. Again, I know we have a couple of people that have gotten behind, but they should be catching up here pretty soon. And if you haven't gotten together with your Zoom team, make sure you do that, because I'm pretty sure there's an assignment coming up in the next couple of weeks where you'll be doing your first you're going to be doing your first Zoom team review of the document. All right, any questions? Let me see. Okay, my little thingy's aligned. Come on. There we go. Got one chat question. All right, can you go over briefly exactly what we are supposed to be researching for task 3? So let me pull that up. So tasks and prompts. It's opening up. Enable. All right. Let me share. Here we go. All right, let's take a look real quick then. Can everybody see that? All right, so task 3. All right. All right, so the candidate will research best practices, create a literature review and annotated bibliography that features descriptions of several best practices and specifically why they were considered, and present findings of the PLC in a collaborative process that aligns the best practices with the results of the academic needs assessment. For the purpose of the assignment, the best practice suggestion must utilize the formal technologies that are being used on the targeted population of students. All right, so basically what you're going to do is once you've taken a look at whatever your needs assessment is for your PLC, you're going to try to look at best instructional practices around what you basically around whatever your needs assessment tells you that you are going to be what you're going to be looking at. And so if you decided that you're going to be looking at an intervention for ELL students in reading because the schools had 3 straight years of negative EROS growth with that particular subgroup of students. So then your research and your literature review will be around whatever that particular intervention is, and then you're going to present that to your group. So you may also discuss then, what type of things we want to look at in addressing this particular need. All right. And again, the annotated bibliography simply talks about the actual author itself. The literature review, you go into actually assessing the actual document. The other thing I want to point out to you is as you are looking up research, really try to stay, you guys are graduate students, so I shouldn't have to tell you, and it hasn't come up yet, so it's a good thing. I shouldn't, have to tell you that like Wikipedia is not a good source. You want to focus in on sound, instructional, preferably peer-reviewed or some of the major journals in helping you come up with this literature review. And if you want an example, then I would look up the example that they posted under APSL tasks and and materials that's also in Blackboard. So again, this tells you what the annotated bibliography is. You want to use data to specify the evidence of the research-based strategies. In other words, whatever remedy you're choosing, what made it successful. And then you want to have the narrative to the references in sources, why this journal, why this author, why whatever have you. And that's what goes to their narrative format. All right, any questions there? Obviously, if they come up, shoot me an email or shoot me a text. I'll be happy to sit and walk you through it. So with that, I'm not going to keep it any longer than I necessarily have to. It is 7:54. If nobody has anything else for the good of the order, I want to say it was good to see you all again. And with regard to this particular assignment coming up, again, both Dr. Lamb and Dr. Stedman on Thursday can even give you more clarity. So if you want to tune into that one, you can listen as well. Heck, I might tune in just to make sure I'm giving you the right guidance, but I think you'll be okay. So go ahead and get your stuff submitted to me as soon as possible, so I can keep you on track and squared away. And we will, I will see you again. And God help me, it'll be week 5 of the course. All right. You guys have a great evening, and I will either see you Thursday or next Tuesday.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. Have a good night. Let's go stop share. And I want to go